Hi everybody, here we are. You're anywhere from a week to 10 days to a month or 6 weeks before you start your class. If this is your first time through, you must be feeling excited, nervous, anxious, terrified, wondering if you're going to do all the right things, if you're going to do them at the right time and help the kids with what they need when they need it. Trust me, if you love your kids, if you care about your kids, you'll do mostly the right things. You build relationships, you keep your eyes and ears open, you'll be fine. I know for some of you, when we say, get the big things right, and then the little things fall in place, it's the way you think. And you say to yourselves, I totally get that. I totally get that. I'm not nervous about it at all. For some of you, though, you don't think quite that way. It's just not how you're wired. And so you're thinking, boy, I get what you're saying, but I need to know, like, what do I do on Tuesday? How am I going to fill 90 minutes every day for a year with these kids? I want you to believe me when I say that early in the year, especially if it's your first time, you may be thinking, how am I going to fill this time? By October, November, you're going to be panicked in the other direction. How can I get all this stuff done that I want to get done in just 90 minutes a day? That's a truth, and anybody who's taught this can tell you that that's a truth. But I want to help you with a couple things today in case you're one of those people who's a little bit nervous about, okay, what specifically am I supposed to do? Let's take something like customer service. If you were a teacher in a regular kind of class, what you would do is prepare a lesson on customer service, and you would deliver this information to your students. They would write down some of it. You would quiz them or test them to see if they retained some of what you wanted to know, and then you would move on. This doesn't work that way, but I don't want you to panic over that. It's a much better way because your students will not only understand a little bit about customer service, they'll understand a lot, and here's how you do it. Let's say that this week, on Monday we had a guest speaker, on Tuesday we toured a car dealership, and on Wednesday we had another speaker, okay? On Thursday now, it's just me and the kids. What are we going to do for 90 minutes? Well, when you have a discussion about the speakers and the visit, do you remember the panel we put together with the students and the facilitators in your training? Do you remember how the students were like, I want to say something, I want to ask something, I want to be a part of this? That's what you're shooting for, is a discussion where you say, okay, car dealership, go. And they just fire away, and you're participating in the discussion, but you're not really having to lead it. You may have to salt this at the beginning and help them along with this. So here's what you do when you're on the visit. When you're going through the car dealership and you think about something like customer service or cash flow or any of 100 other business topics, you go, I noticed with the receptionist, that was where the customer service started. But I noticed the mechanics were like this. I noticed in the parts department that they said, yeah, we try to have the parts delivered within 2 hours of the call. That's customer service. That can make you think about cash flow. Okay, they have $1 million worth of inventory in this parts department. How do you manage that? How do you keep $1 million tied up with that? Well, it's tied into the customer service because the customers don't want to hear, I'm going to have to order that, it'll be a week. Then you think about, okay, the customer service with the salespeople. How do you not go overboard with that? How do you do the right things for a customer and kind of discern what the customer wants to hear? You can then tie that into, do you see how I'm building this relationship with you as the facilitator and students? It's the same as that salesman and the customer. They need to understand how the customer thinks, what the customer is looking for. That's what I'm trying to do with you. That's why I need to know you and how you think. And now you've got cash flow questions about, you've got 100 new cars sitting out there. How'd you pay for those? How long can you sit on those? Where do you get the money to, how do you do all this? If a kid starts bringing this up, you go, man, that would have been a good question to ask yesterday. You know, maybe we can go back and find that out, but next business visit, ask those questions. And by the way, just as a reminder to you and your students, if a student ever says, I didn't really get what I was hoping for out of that visitor or out of that guest or out of that business visit, say to them, that's your deal. All you gotta do is raise your hand. And for you as a facilitator, I just want to interrupt this and say, anything you need, you have a mentor, you have fellow facilitators, you have us at the Institute. Don't ever be nervous about something when you can just ask us. We'll help you with specific things, broad-based things, you name it. There are people to help you. Don't ever think that you can't say, I'm struggling a little bit with this thing, or I don't know what to do. So back to our Thursday. So you've made notes all the way through that business visit of things that you find fascinating about that place. Like, how do they do so that the mechanics, they have enough mechanics to serve the customers without having to wait 3 days, but they don't have 5 mechanics standing around? Because that all ties back to customer service. Now, do you see how you can take all of these things and say, you know, when we went to the bicycle shop last week, did you notice these same things? And I wonder if when we go to the bank next week for a visit, if we're going to see the same things there. When it comes to class business, do you see how we're probably going to do this stuff? We're going to actually do this stuff. When we have a guest coming into the room, do you see how it's the same as the receptionist at the car dealership? Isn't that interesting how we translate this thing to all kinds of different ways that we're going to live our lives? When you do your personal business, do you see how important this is going to be? That's really cool that we're seeing 10 times in a row these things, then they're essential truths, and we know that's true. But I wonder if we don't see the same thing next week. Let's talk about that, because let's figure out if in that business this doesn't matter. In this business, it does. If it's a business that something comes into them and they ship it out immediately, like let's say a vending business where people pay for the product immediately when they get it, your cash flow turns over quickly. When you've got a car that sits on the parking lot out there for 6 months, that's a whole different thing. So do you see how you as the facilitator are constantly looking for interesting things to talk about and spark discussions amongst the kids? You're also modeling behavior for your students where they're going, wow, I didn't think about that stuff there. I'm going to be thinking about that stuff next time because that's cool. That makes it interesting. When you do true colors with your students, now that becomes part of your language. And so you're going, that receptionist seemed like she was what? You think she was high blue? That makes sense, doesn't it, that she would be high blue? That's the person you'd want. You would not want somebody who has a very, very low blue to be the receptionist, because she'd be looking at people like, what are you doing? What are you looking at? Why are you in here? All of these things you're paying attention to all the time. That builds up the stuff you're interested in and want to talk about with the kids to way more than you can fill in 90 minutes. I also encourage you each week with the journals to keep a list of 4, 5, 8, 10 things that you think are interesting from the journals. If you've got 5 minutes at the end, bam, you can start pulling this stuff out and going, John, remember you talked about this thing? Tell us a little bit about it. You can also have 4 or 5 kids at any given time to have articles ready. Just stuff they've read. It can be about technology, business, life, anything that you go, okay, John, go. You got 5 minutes. Talk about this article and it sparks discussion. You should have 8 to 10 articles ready all the time. It could be Amazon using drones. It could be the Apple Watch and how sales aren't going like they thought they were going to go, but Apple doesn't release their information. You see, even in that, you can talk about the technology. Does the Apple Watch make sense? Would you do this? Why wouldn't Apple release these figures? If you were sitting on Apple's board, why would you not want people to know how sales are going? All that, do you see how I mean? Everything sparks about 5 different ways you can go. Your job is to be connecting all this stuff. With the guest speakers, maybe you're helping give context to what they're saying. So maybe a kid says, I got to be honest, I didn't follow any of that. And maybe you say, you know what, I didn't either. We should have asked. Or maybe you say, well, I wonder if it has to do with this. Or real quick here, let's 2 minutes, look up about that kind of business that that person does, and let's find out if she really makes sense by saying that. When you do that kind of thing, you're constantly looking for pulling these business concepts down and going, yep, let's talk about that, let's talk about that, let's make sure you're thinking about this. In your resource center, there are going to be videos, there are going to be a list of business topics, people you can have as guest speakers, a general time frame, but do you understand by what I'm saying that you may not be able to say on September 8th, that's when we're going to do cash flow. What you're going to be doing is paying attention. And you may have heard 5 things about cash flow that week. They may be working on the badge business and may not have collected the advertising fees yet, and they owe money. Do you see what I'm saying? Then you go, let's talk about that, because that's interesting. But just know that we're here, your fellow facilitators are there, your mentors are there. Don't be nervous, don't be panicked. We can help you with all these kinds of things. If you want more specific kinds of things, write to us or call us and ask us, and I'll do some more of these vlogs, whatever serves you well. But you're all going to do terrific. You're going to have an experience that will completely change your life, and I'm so excited for you. I'll see you next time.